Welcome back to Peace Through Strength podcast, brought to you by the American Security Council Foundation. I'm your host, Joy Vatrabek, and with me is senior analyst Lawrence Sanford.
Good day.
And today we have a special guest with us, Derek Maltz. He's retired Director of DEA Special Ops Division. Thank you, Derek, for coming on today.
Thank you very much, and nice meeting you, Larry. It's a pleasure to be here today.
We really appreciate your time. We know he's been on a lot of national programs talking about the fentanyl crisis in China, and Larry wrote a paper about a month ago, and we podcast on the exact issue of fentanyl crisis and China in Mexico and the cartel situation. But we really appreciate you coming on because you have that firsthand knowledge that we don't. So if you can talk to our audience and just get people really, your passion for this is inspiring.
Okay, so thank you. So let me go back to a really important fact. So in 2005, I was assigned to be the special agent in charge of DEA's Special Operations Division, and I worked there almost 10 years. So that place was like overseen by Department of Justice, and we had 30 agencies. When I got there in 2005, there were 9 agencies. When I left, there were 30. Because it was a criminal operational synchronization center to help all the agencies in the U.S. government go after the biggest transnational crime threats that we all identified, trying to use the best and brightest government patriots to go after the threats to this country. So the reason I have this information is because I lived this nightmare as it was evolving, and it's getting worse. And I'm not one of these negative guys that's trying to scare people. I'm just giving you facts. So right around 2005, 2006, we first started seeing a lot of fentanyl deaths in Chicago area. Then it started spreading. And I didn't really know much about fentanyl. I mean, I knew it was used in the hospital. I didn't know it was illicitly being made in Mexico. And they were killing lots of Americans. And I can't remember the exact amount, but there were hundreds of Americans that were dying. The DEA in Chicago did such a great job around 2006, working with the local police and the Mexican counterparts. They wound up seizing a fentanyl lab in Toluca, Mexico, which was run, we believe, by the Sinaloa cartel. They were experimenting in making synthetic drugs like fentanyl, synthetic opioid, so they could profit and not have to go through the growing process. So that kind of went away. Like it just kind of appeared and went away. We didn't see that again until about 2012. But what we did see was something really disturbing. In around 2007, we first saw there was a very large currency seizure in Mexico City. $207 million was seized, mostly $100 denominations, from a Chinese chemical broker who was working very closely with the cartels, bringing in precursor chemicals to make methamphetamine and even maybe fentanyl at that time. We just don't know. We believed it was for methamphetamine. So clearly the cartels had established these really good relationships with the Chinese chemical brokers. All right, put that aside a second. In 2008, 2009, we started seeing what I call the bombing of America with synthetic drugs. They started selling what we now know as K2 spice and bath salts. Really, I knew it as synthetic cannabinoids and synthetic cathinones, okay? And it was just chemicals made in Wuhan-style labs in China. And then they would send the liquid over to America, and then criminal organizations in America would spray the liquid on leaf material, chop it up, sell it in little bags in these grocery stores, convenience stores, and bodegas and gas stations run by Middle Easterners in America. And they were smoking this stuff. So kids started smoking it. They thought it was synthetic marijuana. And we started seeing emergency room admissions. We started seeing deaths. We started seeing poison control center calls going through the roof. So it's become very alarming. So as the head of
I see that in Middle Eastern stores in America. So how did they get away with that?
Well, we could talk about that. I just want to go through this quick chronology, then we'll get into that. So what happened was they were selling this stuff. Kids were buying it. It had like really cool packaging, like Scooby-Doo snacks, King Kong, very attractive marketing to the kids. They were smoking it, and then parents were calling like, what the hell is going on? What is this stuff? Well, we didn't know much about it, but we started major operations. You can look it up. Operation Logjam and Project Synergy. We did a whole of government approach to target the importation of this poison, and we kind of put a dent on the trafficking of this stuff, and we identified networks. Well, then all of a sudden, around 2012, we started seeing some of these same lab operations in China starting to send fentanyl that was made in labs, illicit fentanyl, down in China, and they were selling it over the internet, selling it, on websites. And we had undercover operations. We started buying this stuff, and then we started seeing, unfortunately, a lot of deaths in America from what we thought was heroin overdoses, but actually, in fact, it wasn't heroin overdoses. It was actually fentanyl that was killing these kids. So we got really concerned, and we started what we call Operation Deadly Merchant. We also created stuff like this around 2014, fentanyl overview. We sent it out to law enforcement around the country because we were very concerned about this fentanyl and how potent it was. We briefed Eric Holder, former Attorney General, 2014, basically knew that this was the perfect storm for our country because Dominican traffickers were working with Mexicans, and they're starting to put this stuff on the street in like what they were selling as purported heroin, but in fact it was fentanyl mixed with some heroin. Anyway, so the rest is history. So ever since 2012, fentanyl production in China and then now in Mexico has gone off the charts, and we have historic levels of kids around our country dying and parents totally in the dark about this substance coming in from these countries.
Yeah, it's sad, and I'm glad you're bringing this to everybody's attention. Hopefully we can get that out there.
Exactly.
The Chinese embassy in Washington said that we should look at ourselves as being part of the problem.
Absolutely, they're right. So there's a huge demand. Now you got to remember, Larry, very, very important. I'm glad you asked that question. Great question. The corporate cartels in America, Big Pharma, they dumped 100 billion opioids into America in a 9-year period. That was revealed during a Washington Post, very good investigative story. And I know the reporters, I work with them, help them any way I could. And a lot of people in America got addicted to these legitimate pharmaceutical grade opioid pills. And over the years, they started going from the pills to now the very white heroin on the streets. And the white heroin that was being sold in America, very, very pure, 80, 90% heroin. But for the first time, people were able to snort it. So America's appetite for drugs started to totally grow and grow and grow over the years. And of course, when COVID hit, it went to a whole new level because of anxiety, depression, social isolation. So a lot of the younger generation started trying to medicate themselves with drugs. But unfortunately, the illicit drug supply is absolutely tainted all over the place with fentanyl. But where it really started to get bad is when the Sinaloa cartel started getting the precursor chemicals directly from the Chinese, making their own fentanyl in the labs in Mexico, making the fake pills like Mexican oxy pills, right? Oxycontin, fake Xanax, fake Percocet, and started pushing this stuff into America. And a lot of the younger generation on social media started using this stuff for the first time and dying rapidly. So America did. But Larry, what I really wanted to say, and I went over it quickly, is that the American Department of Education, CDC, and other elements of the government failed the country miserably because they never told the public about what was going on. And that, as a matter of fact, they still don't do it. It's being done by armies of families that I work with all over the country that are educating the kids in school, that are going on TV, going to Congress, doing videos, whatever it may be, putting billboards up of their dead kids, putting out, learning materials. But our own education systems failed, and they're still failing. So the Chinese embassy is not wrong about U.S. has some involvement here.
And Larry did a great job in his article in pointing that out. And I remember you speaking about that the numbers, you had 18 to 45-year-olds were being killed by the fentanyl. And I believe you said, Derek, it wasn't coming from the CDC.
Right. So that's another point. So I work closely, Larry, you may not know this, but with literally like thousands of families. We do rallies in Washington. We did one at the Chinese embassy 2 years ago. We did one last year. We're doing another one this year, a big one this year in September. But the thing is that Jim Rao, he lost his son in Ohio. Jim Rao is the CEO, founder of an organization called Families Against Fentanyl. And I became very friendly with Jim. He's got tremendous passion. As a matter of fact, we're going to be on Dr. Phil Wednesday. I think one of the last episodes we were recorded way back when. Anyway, Jim Rao, he has a team of analysts that go through all the CDC data and come up with all these alarming statistics that we're now seeing for the first time. The statistics on 18 to 45 came from Jim Rao, not CDC. Everyone's jumped on the bandwagon and wants to take credit for it, but it's Jim's analysts and his nonprofit that have figured this out.
Wow.
Well, thank you, Jim.
So how does America as a society stop it or slow it down?
Well, number one, every parent, every aunt, every uncle, everyone, thanks to people like you guys that are actually interested to put the message out, has to talk to their kids immediately. I highly recommend, and I say it all the time, I have no interest in this documentary. I don't get paid for any of this stuff. There's a documentary called Dead on Arrival. It's like 21 minutes long, and all my friends that I work with in California are featured in there when they tell the story of losing their loved ones. And it's very impactful, very short. There's no excuse not to watch it. But we have to educate the kids. The younger generation is not watching mainstream media. They're not watching cable news. They're not reading newspapers. They're not listening to podcasts too much, but they are watching the video reels all day long on social media. That's why I have asked the White House, I've asked Congress, I've asked the media to declare a public health national security emergency and host a summit at the White House with the young social media influencers, the professional athletes, sports leagues, the celebrities, role models. We start creating mass amounts of video reels and get them on all the social media sites. At least this way, the kids will learn from these videos because that's what they're watching every day. And
Yes,
they're not learning right now. There's a gap in education, and we're assuming that they're learning about this stuff. So that's number one on the demand side. We have to do that immediately. That's way overdue.
Let me interrupt you for a second, Derek.
Yes, sir.
These videos, is there any chance that they get played on TikTok?
Right. Well, that's the thing. TikTok, yeah, you get them on TikTok, Instagram, Snapchat. Those are the primary ones. But once you get them out there, then the kids are going to watch them. And if it's being done by the social media influencers, they'll watch them. They're not going to follow Derek Maltz. I'm not on TikTok anymore, but I'm on Instagram and Facebook and all these other places, Snapchat, but they're not going to follow me. They got to follow somebody that they look up to, like these professional athletes, role models, and social media influencers. Some of these people literally have 10 million followers or more.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's kind of one thing that could be done, and there's no excuse. Like, if I was talking to Joe Biden today, I'd look him right in the eyes and say, look, President, you said this is a national security emergency. Your Secretary of Homeland Security recently said it's the single greatest challenge we have in America. So why can't you have a summit? Get all the sports leagues, men and women sports leagues. Get the big name, Tom Brady's, LeBron James. Get them in the White House. Ask them to help us out. We want to save the future generation. Guaranteed they wouldn't do it. But they use the social media influences to put out the public campaign messages, which is smart, by the way. I give them credit for that. But why can't they use the same social media influences to put out these life-saving messages?
Yeah.
So I get asked a question, and I think
let me back up. I'm sorry, Joy. Let me back up because I didn't answer the second part of your question.
Go ahead.
But right now we have to deal with the supply side like we've never done before, and that's the problem. Because if your house was leaking with a pipe broke in your house, you'd have to shut the main valve down immediately. Well, right now the main valve for the death and destruction in fentanyl is coming out of Mexico. We have to shut it off. The only way to do that is using technology and assets that the U.S. has available. So we should go to Mexico and offer up the services of our U.S. military intelligence community to shut down the command and control of the cartels. But that's never going to happen with this administration. Anyway, sorry, Joy.
No, you're fine. Finish up Larry's question there. I get asked, Larry and I have been talking about the fentanyl issue, and I talk to people about it, and after I heard you speak, I've been talking to them about it, and they're asking me, so why do they want to kill off their people they're supplying with these drugs if they're making money off of them?
Number one question that I always get, great question, and it defies logic, and I 100% agree. But what people don't realize is how ruthless and how focused the cartels are on making money. They are making so much money now, billions and billions of dollars between the migrant smuggling, other criminal activity, human trafficking, sex trafficking, and the drug trafficking around the world, not just into the US. They have command and control in like 40 or 50 countries. So they're making so much money on drugs and all this other stuff. They don't really care about these young customers. What they care about is the addiction. They want to drive addiction. By selling pills, they basically are attracting many more customers and a lot more money. They don't have the overhead that they had when they had to make heroin with the poppy and the opium. So right now, basically, they have an unbelievable opportunity to make a massive amount of money, and that's what's happening. Most people are dying from the pills. Like Narcan's saving hundreds of thousands of people, by the way. And I don't even know how many because they don't keep track, which is another sad story. These people, some of them are so addicted to these pills, they're taking so many pills per day. And the pills cost less than 10 cents to make one. So they're making millions and millions of dollars on the pills, billions of dollars probably. And they really don't care. And we've talked to drug dealers and they've said, we never pay attention to like, are they going to die? We're trying to make money. Sometimes trying to support their own habit.
That is ruthless. I guess it's a plus for the Chinese too.
Well, the Chinese are taking advantage because the cartels are doing all the dirty work now. And because our country's not connecting the dots, here's another thing that no one's paying attention to. The cartels are doing all the money laundering now the Chinese are doing all the money laundering for the cartels. They're picking up suitcases of cash all around the country, and they're laundering the money in really sophisticated ways that we've never seen before, beating the good guys with technology that we can't infiltrate. Our laws are so antiquated, and the money's getting back to the cartels way more efficiently and quicker than they've ever seen before, and they're not paying a lot of commission for the laundering services. So the Chinese, and then they're buying up land and real estate and farms in America with the cash that they're picking up from the cartels. It's insanity.
We talk about the land grab problem as well.
One of my pet peeves is the 300,000 Chinese students that are here in America, and they're used as goats to carry the money into the Chinese money laundering operations. We should. I'm a firm believer in reciprocity. If we can't buy land in China, China shouldn't be able to buy land here in America. And if they have 300,000 students here in America and we have 10,000 students in China, we should cut the 300,000 back to 10,000. So.
Right, and Larry, that's a great point because these kids are coming here under the disguise of education, and many of them are very bright young Chinese students, and they get here and then they're working, picking up suitcases of cash, supporting the Communist Party of China's overall goal of destabilizing America, destroying America, that we're the number one adversary. Of course, they want to use all tools to destroy their adversary. That's what unrestricted warfare is.
Yeah.
So that's what's really disturbing, that they're in our country. So we can revoke visas immediately.
Is there a way to vet, or do we vet these students? Well,
that's another question. I don't know the extent of the vetting. They do, basic vetting, I guess. I hope. I've never done that before, Joy, but I know that, like, from all our investigations, we're seeing more and more of these students involved in picking up the money.
Yeah.
Sad, because like you said, a lot of them are bright, and it would be nice to have good students that want to be in America here, but.
Right. Exactly.
And if you could talk too a little bit about the young people, that was very disturbing to me when to hear you talk about our young people that are dying from this, like under 13 even.
Okay, so let me just give you a little insight. So in 2017, 18, I started meeting some families that were losing their kids from fentanyl. And I started getting really, really upset because I didn't myself realize how many younger kids were starting to die from this stuff. So I went on a mission to start helping families. I did a documentary out in Ohio in 2017, early 18, with Sarah Carter, who works on Fox News, and Heidi Riggs is the mother of Marin Riggs, who died out in Ohio. And the documentary was called Not in Vain. And we had a opening showcase of the documentary in Washington, D.C. But right around the time we were making it, there was an admiral from the U.S. Navy, Admiral Sandy Winnefeld, whose 18-year-old son was at the University of Denver, a very prestigious university. And the admiral got the call in the middle of the night that his son was dead from fentanyl. And then, of course, the next day, that was in November or October of 2017. The next day, Eric Bolling, who's now on Newsmax, 8 o'clock show, used to be Fox News, his son got a call that his son was dead from fentanyl. So it really started resonating in my brain. I had to do more. And so we started meeting all these families, starting to understand. You can see behind me that there's collages back there. I've made like these, hold on a second, I'll show you something here. So I started making these collages because I knew there wasn't enough attention to this problem around the country. So I started making these collages of all these young kids that were dying and basically giving them out to Congress, sending them to media outlets, using them on national news. And people started to wake up a little bit. And then I get stories that were just so devastating, like this one here. I'll take it off my wall. I always hang this one up. Keeps me motivated daily. So this is Alex Capilouto. She was an Arizona State University senior. She came home on Christmas break. She took what she thought was one oxycodone pill. She took only a half of it, and her mother found it dead in the bedroom like 3 days before Christmas. And her father sent me this note when I was going to Arizona, say, take Alex with you, Derek. She should have been graduating from ASU this year. She was killed by a single counterfeit oxycodone pill that came across our border. Thanks for everything you do. So all this stuff started resonating. So I started aligning myself with these different nonprofit groups like Lost Voices of Fentanyl, Demand Zero, Song for Charlie, Voices of Awareness around the country, and trying to get all the messaging out on national news and in Congress. So we've made some headway. Now the parents, just to tell you an interesting story, which was great that they did this. You know, when I started my collage project, I had no idea how big it was going to be. So the families then took it over from me, and they started making the Lost Voices of Fentanyl, which was much cleaner. It had the name of the kid and the age, and it became even more eye-opening for anyone that wanted to see this. You know, you see these young kids, and you see how beautiful they are. It starts becoming overwhelming. And then we started handing these out, passing these around, really started getting more and more attention in the national circle in Washington. And a lot of the media outlets around the country started picking up on it. Now we just can't even keep up with the amount of dead kids that are being found in their houses all day, every day, 7 days a week. We're losing about 300 Americans every single day to drugs. And the vast majority are from the poisoning of fentanyl. So anyway, so once we started getting that going, it really started to move forward. We started helping changing the narrative, like on national news shows like Fox. For a long time, they were calling it drug overdoses. We've been calling it poisonings for many years now, because overdoses would send the message to the viewer that the kid just took a little too much of a specific substance.
Yeah, yeah.
So if a kid's going to go take an OxyContin to relax, right, and they take one pill, you're not going to die from taking one pill OxyContin if it's real, okay? So they're not overdosing from OxyContin, right? It's a poisoning. As a matter of fact, in the story I told you before about the lab in Toluca, Mexico, John Walters, the former drug czar, in the news article I always highlight, he said that the cartels were poisoning the drug supply. And that was 2006. So do the math. How many years ago?
Yeah.
It's been going on for too long.
Exactly.
Now they're getting too good at it. And you also brought up the young kids. I mean, I have an 8-year-old, so it concerned me quite a bit that some of these are made to look like candy, like Skittles. And I know there was a warning out at Halloween time.
Well, look, you guys who live in Florida, Airbnb is being sued now because there was a 19-month-old that died in a house on vacation with their family down in South Florida. I forgot the town.
I heard about that. Yeah.
Where was it?
I don't know. I did hear about that, yes.
Yeah, you go look it up. Airbnb, 19-month-old. So the poor baby died because the fentanyl was left behind. And this is happening a lot more and more. As a matter of fact, the fastest growing death rate, according to the Families Against Fentanyl, is the age group under 14. We believe it or not, there's a lot of dead infants under 1 because they get into the stash of their parents or their grandparents or their uncles or aunts or friends, and it's left behind. And like these pills that are coming in now, many of them are made to look like, they're rainbow colored. And the speculation and the informant information and the DEA administrator's warning reveals that they're targeting Americans young Americans to drive addiction. And we found many, many seizures of these pills in Skittles boxes, Whoppers boxes, all kinds of different things. Skittles Nerds, I think, Sweet Tarts, I can't remember. But they package them in these boxes, not necessarily to market them to kids, but in many cases to conceal them in their smuggling methods because they're very innovative. But they can get into the hands of kids inadvertently, not necessarily deliberately. They also were making these big chunks of multicolored, look like chalk. Well, you know how the kids love drawing chalk on the driveways, right? Mm-hmm. Well, this stuff's laying around and kid gets a hold of this piece of fentanyl, and that next thing you know, they're putting their hands in their mouth and they're dying. Oh. So it's happening in America more than you would think.
Thank you, Noah. Our podcast engineer said it was Wellington, Florida, Airbnb.
Yeah, exactly. And we also had, for example, a lot of people think, well, I won't take pills. I'll just snort cocaine. Well, we had 5 or 6 West Point cadets in South Beach area last April, May, something like that. And they were down there on spring break and they were snorting cocaine and they all went down. We had 5 mothers or women that were at the Cheesecake Factory in New Jersey last month before. They went out on a break during lunch break or whatever, and they went to snort some cocaine to get high, and all 5 of them went down. Fortunately, the Narcan revived 4 of them, but the one mother, single mother, 9-year-old kid died. So there's a lot of horror stories out there. We have a professional hockey player, Jimmy Hayes, who was using cocaine, thought he'd be fine, and he died. And I never forget, the autopsy report came out and the headlines in the Boston paper, his wife was shocked by the autopsy report because who would have thought there was fentanyl mixed in with cocaine? But that's the problem. The illicit drug supply is tainted right now.
And it's even being mixed in with marijuana is what I understand too, right?
Well, there has been cases out there where people have, been poisoned from fentanyl in marijuana. I personally don't think that it's widespread yet. Okay. Maybe one day it will be. I hope not. But I think that's just by accident in many cases, or somebody just wanted to see what it's like. But I really don't know. We don't hear a lot of that, but it's something that could continue to be a really big, trend.
So right now it's more cocaine and pills.
Most of the problems we have now is the pills, and they're making the powder. But here's the other evolving trend. There's few trends that are really, really concerning. Number one is a lot of this powder is being made in Mexico, being sent over into America, and then American criminal networks are buying pill presses on Amazon, and they're basically making their own pills. They're buying the dyes, the binding ingredients, and they're making their own pills, their own counterfeit pills, and putting them out because so much money's to be made. Like, as an example, some of these pill presses can make 7,000 to 10,000 pills an hour. If you sell a pill for $20, do the math. And you go 8 hours a day, you're making pills, you can make over $1 million in sales in one day from your basement.
Wow.
So it's very concerning. That's one trend. The other trend that's concerning is we're starting to see potential fentanyl operations in America where they're getting the precursors sent directly from China or maybe from Mexico, and they're starting to make their own fentanyl in their own places. There was a lab seized in Houston several months ago. Very concerning. There also is a trend where now the Chinese criminals are starting to make more potent synthetic opioids like what we call nitazene, etinitazene, isonitazene, sometimes known as pyro on the streets. And that stuff is allegedly 10 or 20 times more potent than fentanyl, and that's being found now in autopsies around America. And the latest trend, which is a disaster, go look it up. It's an absolute disaster. The sale of xylazine, which is a pharmaceutical grade drug used for sedation in animals like horses and maybe elephants. And it's actually being mixed now with fentanyl. And the DEA put out a warning like last month that they're finding this xylazine mixed in fentanyl in like 48 out of 50 states. By now, it's probably every state. And that stuff is being sold directly on the websites out of China. You could go buy it from your house right now, get it delivered to your house. And that's what a lot of drug traffickers are doing. They're mixing it in with the fentanyl because it's increasing the amount of powder that they can put into the pill machines or put out on the street. And it's really disastrous because it's actually a flesh-eating drug. It's causing necrosis, which is the rotten of human tissue. So it's actually literally rotten people inside and out. They have skin ulcerations. They have big open wounds. Many cases, they get amputations. So they're laying in the streets just dissolving their skin. It's horrible. And this is happening more than you would imagine.
Yeah, it's horrible. You have any questions more
No,
for him?
no.
When I heard this, I just went right home telling my husband.
Well, one thing I could tell you, that I can honestly tell you that this is not going to get any better by just talking about it. If the United States government, more than law enforcement, because law enforcement is doing one hell of a job. So I want to give you a couple of statistics so you know. Last year, the CBP on our border, they seized like 7,000 pounds of fentanyl. And DEA last year, working with their partners, seized about 57 million fake pills.
Wow.
Now, do you realize that according to the DEA, 6 out of 10 pills that they analyze in their lab contain a potentially lethal dose of fentanyl? Do you realize that this is 30 grams of salt? If this was fentanyl, this could potentially kill 15,000 people, okay? So it doesn't take a lot. It takes a few grains, right? So basically, law enforcement is out there. They're making arrests. They're doing indictments. They're seizing record levels of fentanyl. The border agents, even though they're doing migrant processing, they're still seizing records amount. This year alone, they already seized 6 months in 2023. They already seized 13.9 thousand pounds. Okay, so the thing is the production is off the charts in Mexico. So law enforcement's not going to stop the deaths and destruction by just making these seizures, but they're out there working hard. So my hat goes off to law enforcement. This is why we need a much more aggressive engagement from the president, the White House, Department of Defense, Intel community, Department of Education. Other people have to get more involved. This is a huge crisis in our country. And even, like I said, Homeland Security, Mayorkas secretary, said recently, you know, with all the deaths from fentanyl, it's the greatest single challenge in the country. So the average people in America are not paying attention because they say, oh, it's not gonna hurt my kid. My kid's a good kid. Well, what about in Ohio State University last year? 2 21-year-old kids, I think both of them were 21. One was a pre-med student. They took what they thought was Adderall, which is a very important drug when you have attention deficit disorder or hyperactivity. And the poor students died. I mean, again, seniors, pre-med, finals week, you know, this is what's happening. This is the new America when it comes to fentanyl and synthetic drugs. This has been a game changer for the country. So until people start getting more aware, and more engaged and the government takes more aggressive action, we're just going to keep talking about it. And I'm really tired of talking about it.
Go ahead. This is Adderall they're buying on the street.
Yeah, this is the fake Adderall.
Okay.
And again, the problem is not too long ago, and I don't know if it's still the case, the FDA put out a warning message that there's a shortage of, pharmaceutical grade, real Adderall. Okay. Now, if you don't think the bad guys take advantage of that, you're crazy. Like, the bad guys know there's a shortage of Adderall. They just make more and more fake Adderall. And in many cases, it's mixed with methamphetamine, and sometimes it's mixed with fentanyl. They want to get people addicted. They want people buying more, and that's what they're doing. Hey, we just seized a few months ago up in New England, the DEA, working with their counterparts, seized 700,000 fake Adderall pills. So they're out there, and these particular pills weren't made in Mexico. They were made right in a house in Rhode Island by some, American citizen who was trying to make money.
Did you have a question?
No. My only observation is it's a major crisis, and I don't see either political party making it an issue.
Right. So I can tell you this, Larry, I've said a long time now, for me, it's not a red or a blue issue. It's a red, white, and blue issue. All Americans are impacted. But unfortunately, it is now becoming political. That's why you hear a lot more from the Republicans on the House side and the Senate side. There's movement now to declare it a weapon of mass destruction. There's talk about, designating the cartels terrorists again. But unfortunately, I have very little confidence in most of the congressmen and women. They don't really seem that interested. They want to talk about it. They want to grandstand, politicize it. But until they take some action, it's not impressive to hear them talk about it.
Yeah.
If they were able to make the drug cartels terrorist groups, can a lot more be done then?
Well, in theory, yeah, you get more authorities, more capabilities, and the biggest thing is you'd have more focus on the threat. Like if Al-Qaeda or Hezbollah or ISIS had a anthrax weapon of mass destruction in Mexico, what do you think we would do? Just sit back and rely on the Mexicans? No. We would use the best and brightest in our country and go after it because it could kill Americans. Well, there's never been in the history of the country that I'm aware of any terrorist organization or organizations combined that have killed this amount of Americans. I mean, we went into a 20-year war because they killed 3,000 Americans at the World Trade Center.
Yeah.
We lose 9,000 a month now.
Yeah, the only issue I would have with that of Americans invading Mexico, that has not worked well in the past. So maybe...
Yeah, but I'm not even, Larry, I'm not even talking about invading America. That's one thing I want to clarify. What I'm talking about is years ago, we worked very closely with the Colombian National Police and the Colombian government as part of Plan Colombia. We gave them resources. We gave them money. They wanted us to use U.S. military technologies and capabilities in country. We worked together. We didn't invade Colombia. And it was very successful, in my view, back in the day, what we did to some of those cartels.
Yes.
The same concept in Mexico. We're not suggesting, and I don't think anybody's suggesting, like an invasion into Mexico. That probably would be bad. I'm not a military expert, but it doesn't seem like that would be good.
Yeah, right. But we agree.
Yeah, we agree. Yeah.
But I do think some of the cool technology we have that's been effective in precision strikes against enemy targets, like you talked about Soleimani, same type of thing against some of these kingpins down there. Because we can't rely solely on corrupt and soft on crime Mexican leadership to save American kids. That's not good either.
Yeah.
Right. We agree. We're happy for what you're doing out there. Thank you very much.
Thank you for following up. I appreciate everything.
Yeah, wish you well.
Appreciate all your hard work.
Wish you well, and I wish America well.
Hi. Yes. Thank you for taking your time out to speak to us today, Derek.
You got it. If you're done recording, we could talk a couple seconds more.
Well, I'll finish to our listeners. You can read Larry's article on our website at www.ascf.us. And if Derek wants to give me the information on the nonprofits, I can put that up there too. Just definitely subscribe and comment on our YouTube channel and Rumble at American Security Council Foundation. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And we ask you to join us next time on Peace Through Strength podcast. Thank you.
Thank you, Joy.
Thank you, Larry.
Thank you, Derek.
Thank you, Derek.
Thank you.